Hey everyone, today continues my special bonus series on the impact and value of making healthcare consumer centered based on recent conversations and posts and ideas. We're diving deep into why we're on this mission in the first place and what we want to accomplish. Part 1 was my top advice to health systems on why they should become consumer centered. Part 2 built on that and was my top advice for digital health companies to understand their role in the process. Today I want to offer my advice for non-traditional entrants to understand how to survive and even thrive in healthcare to avoid more of you out there adding to the list of failed attempts to disrupt, revolutionize, and reimagine care. The mission remains noble, but the path is daunting. And please note that by non-traditional, I mean any entity that offers healthcare services but is not a hospital, integrated delivery network, or other health system. So this includes retailers like the ones I just mentioned, as well as national payviders, consumer brands, fitness, grocery, and so forth. All right, let's dive in. My first piece of advice for non-traditional entrants is don't overestimate what your brand means in healthcare. This is interesting because I want to encourage in the right ways here and also be realistic about what we've learned from this graveyard of consumer brands entering the space over the last few years. I will start by saying I applaud the brands that are pushing the boundaries with their marketing messaging. A few years ago, I started giving keynotes with screenshots of messaging from non-traditional entrants and showing how much they were attacking directly the traditional patient experience and saying, look, we're more convenient, we're more accessible, we're cheaper, we're easier to figure out. And that messaging is getting through. It's getting through to consumers. And so it's out there and I applaud that. I just want you to be careful and understand that yes, adoption moves at the speed of trust. So your brand might be trusted in other places, but that doesn't mean that it always translates in the same way to this new space. Consumers aren't yet used to seeing you here. And the reality is you can't just put a new healthcare service or offering in front of people and expect them to know what to do with it. Consumers probably aren't shopping for your service or product now. They don't want to think about their healthcare, and they're already frustrated from their experience with traditional care. So what that means is altogether, just be careful that you don't overestimate how much people are going to adopt your service or product just because your brand is popular in other spaces. To counteract that, just simply put your most relatable, human-centered foot forward. It's really interesting because that bravado in other areas might be helpful, but it often counts against you in healthcare. That's one reason why they're so frustrated with other aspects of their consumer experience, because it's happening when they're sick and they're stressed out and they're worried and they don't know how they're going to pay for things. So the mindset of a healthcare consumer is often very different than somebody shopping for almost anything else. So a couple of other pro tips here. I would say just drill down and be very specific. Be focused on a specific condition or a treatment path or a demographic, and try not to boil the ocean. Because again, that wording, that bravado just is a smokescreen in many cases. On the other hand, you can position yourself as an alternative to sick care. Just be specific, find that flavor and stick with it. Another pro tip that I'm sharing with pretty much every type of organization in this bonus series is to become a trusted information source. Now, I would say this applies doubly to consumer brands that have built up trust in other areas, because just realize what the landscape looks like out there right now. We've been talking about online health information and misinformation for over a decade now, and it's barely beginning. It's actually just growing and becoming worse. It's becoming harder to know what sources to trust. So you're not just fighting information from other competitors, but you're also fighting mis and disinformation from online sources. Some of them might have malicious intentions, but others don't. They're just misinformed. And if you're not careful, you can be labeled as one of those non-credible sources. So use that trust in your brand from other places and become a trusted information source. You can do a lot of good. All right, so again, my first insight is don't overestimate what your brand means in healthcare. My second piece of advice is don't underestimate the resistance from traditional healthcare. There are providers, there are hospitals and health systems that have been in existence for a couple of centuries now. They've run their businesses a certain way. They've had this space kind of all to themselves, and they don't like new people coming in. I mean, just think about the messaging that was shared with providers a few years ago at kind of the peak of retail health, right? They saw it as an existential threat, and they still do. So I would say play nice with that. You're coming into their realm. Yes, it is ripe for disruption, but who does the disruption matters. It's weird to think about it this way, but are you able to honor the health systems that you're trying to disrupt at the same time? The fact is, patients like their doctors and they like their clinical teams for the most part. What they don't like is the process and the system and the experience around it. The billing, the lack of pricing transparency, the lack of access, the lack of ease and convenience and affordability. It's really not rocket science. It's still just not being talked about at scale. But think about what that means. If a doctor consistently says, don't trust this new entrant to take care of your health at all, then a lot of patients aren't going to. Just remember, one asset that most healthcare organizations don't have, or maybe they do, but they're not relying on it enough, are consumer behavior insights. So use what you have, use those insights to create and design better services and market them in ways that make people very aware of the difference between that and traditional care. Understanding and knowing exactly why the resistance is there can help you navigate that path forward and play your role in moving healthcare forward. So again, number 2 was don't underestimate the resistance from traditional care. Number 3, don't confuse the relationship aspects of healthcare with the transactional aspects. This can be a challenge to consumer brands that kind of causes you to rewire the way that you engage consumers, because up until now, most likely you've been in a primarily transactional engagement or relationship with consumers. But harkening back to what I just said, one of the reasons for resistance from traditional care is that there are actually relationships between people, between a patient and a provider. In fact, just be aware of the language here. It's one reason why the majority of providers still don't even refer to people as consumers. They only talk about them as patients because they only want to address the time when they have a relationship with them. Again, I see that as an asset or a strength of consumer brands coming into the space, but you just have to understand where that comes into play. As we have seen entities come in and attempt to optimize some of the transactional aspects of care, especially on the medication side and the home delivery of devices and products, there's a growing opportunity to recognize that, lean into it, and admit that you're on the transactional side as opposed to the relationship side. I've seen that as long as you recognize which side of this you're on, that you have more play and more runway. Does that make sense, right? Like, there are new hybrid models out there that do include new AI-based maybe decision support or AI-based information sources, but they also require a relationship. There's still a health coach involved or some other type of provider involved. There's still a human being involved between a consumer and the health services that they're being engaged in. So there are more hybrids. It's just a lot harder when you are trying to explain the difference between your new model, what you believe your, revolutionary new way of doing things is, when you are trying to explain it in a way that sounds like you don't care. And that can turn off people, not just providers, but patients as well. So understanding what that patient-provider relationship is and where it's central and where we don't want to change it, that's a big piece. That's a big piece of how you move forward and actually sell the part that you are trying to change or revolutionize. Recognize that there are transactional aspects of healthcare and relationship-based aspects, and do your best to lean in one way or the other, and just be conscious that people feel differently depending on which side of that you're on. So number 3 was don't confuse the relationship aspect with the transactional aspects of healthcare. Number 4 is one I admit I'm still learning how to do more, but it's important to understand consumers' buying behavior. There's some real basic tenets that I do believe are at the heart of why some non-traditional business models haven't worked out. The main one is that people might be looking to be well every day, but they're usually not looking for healthcare every day. Most people aren't. And there are so many privacy laws in place now, and they're not going to go away. They might shift over time. They might add to or take away a little bit from the existing laws, but they're always going to be there, and they're there for a good reason. They're there to protect privacy. But that does mean you have to understand that and how that accounts for differences in how consumers buy and search for and consider healthcare services. The preponderance of high deductible health plans, for instance, does change buying behavior, because that deductible means you have to spend a good amount. It's essentially a cash pay economy before you get to the benefits that you have somewhere. So while we do talk a lot in healthcare about choices not being completely in your own hands as a consumer because of the benefits package that you have or the plan that you're on, the fact is you usually have some amount of cash to pay before a deductible kicks in at all. So there are more consumerized aspects of the buying journey that are important to take into account. Again, a couple of opportunities here. The first one is to be as transparent as possible with your pricing. That goes a long way with consumers. That does get you past the conversation that a patient usually has with their provider organization, with where they're trying to seek care, because they're trying to say, well, how much is this going to cost? And they get frustrated with not knowing, and the entity doesn't know, the health plan or the provider, and they're trying to offer different prices for things. And you're just like, I just want to know what this costs before I do it. It's the only thing in my life that I don't know how much it's going to cost before I do it. And I need to do it because I'm not feeling well or I'm sick. So that process is very different than almost any other type of consumer behavior that you see in other industries. The other pro tip I have is kind of an opportunity that, again, that Zane and I have been exploring a lot lately. And that is, can you make a connection on the wellness or preventive side of care and really lean into that? Because consumers do buy those products and services very differently. When you're looking to prevent or reduce, some pain or some limiting factor in your health, you are looking very differently. If you're not looking to actually meet with a healthcare provider, if you're not trying to schedule an appointment, your buying behavior is very different. That's one reason why we've been talking so much about GLP-1s and other weight management and metabolic health offerings, because they impact those buying behaviors. So that was number 4, understand consumers' buying behaviors in healthcare. And number 5, consumers need you to continue to innovate on their behalf. I thought this was a perfect place to kind of wrap up the conversation, because think about it. Consumers really do need you to continue to innovate. While yes, we do see this graveyard of retailers and other non-traditional players who haven't succeeded yet, or maybe just retooling, or at the very least, they haven't recouped their investments yet. And a lot of traditional care looks at that and says, see, it's just too hard. Healthcare's hard. I will never let that get in the way of trying to make true progress here, or keep me from trying. The fact that healthcare's hard has just become an excuse for brands to not try this anymore. And we need the innovation. We need people coming in and positioning themselves and their new products and services as more convenient, easier, cheaper, more accessible. We need that, because otherwise the innovation just isn't going to happen. And I don't know that it's even fair to say that that should have been coming from traditional care all along. Traditional care has a hard enough time keeping their regular engines running on a 200-year-old fee-for-service business model. So what you can do is continue to use your marketing positioning to increase consumers' expectations and ask them to demand more from their experience. It's funny how often we tend to like to even make fun of or make light of things like pharma ads, drug ads that have a lot of disclaimers and things when they say, ask your doctor about so-and-so. But the fact is that ask your doctor about marketing tactic really works. So the easiest thing you can do here to move forward is kind of similar to my advice to digital health companies: create products and services that are so good that traditional care has to pay attention. I would say create products and services so good that consumers have to pay attention, that they have to try it out, that they can't help but tell themselves and their loved ones and those they're caring for, you know what? I know this brand, clearly I bought their stuff in this other place and I don't know what they're like in healthcare, but what they're looking like is so compelling, I have to try it. So just understand that consumers need you. Again, that was number 5. Consumers need you, non-traditional entrants, to continue to innovate on their behalf. All right, so let me recap real quick. Number 1 was don't overestimate what your brand means in healthcare. Number 2 was don't underestimate the resistance from traditional care. Number 3, don't confuse the relationship aspects of healthcare with the transactional aspects. Number 4, understand consumers' buying behaviors in healthcare. And number 5, consumers need you to continue to innovate on their behalf. All right, well, that was a wrap up for this third part in this series. I just want to put it out there and conclude by saying I'm rooting for all players in healthcare that are pushing for something better, whether you come from a traditional or non-traditional side of healthcare. Whether you come from sick care or well care, whether you come from a 200-year-old hospital or a 200-year-old consumer brand or a 2-month-old startup, whoever is out there pushing for something better, I'm rooting for you. I'm cheering for you from the sidelines and I'm doing all I can to help you succeed. I'd love to know what you thought about all of this. And coming up next in this series, I'm going to share my insights for health consumers ourselves. We are all health consumers all of the time. So how can we usher in this consumer-centered era and improve our own experiences along the way? What's possible from us? Find out next time. Oh, and if you haven't subscribed yet to our YouTube channel, don't forget about that. In the meantime, thanks for everything you're doing to make healthcare consumer-centered.